So in 1975, I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. They told me I had a month or two to live unless I cough or sneeze, in which case I might die immediately. So I spent some time being terminally ill, and I thought if I live until New Year's that year, that was 8 months away, that I would celebrate still being alive in Club Med in Martinique. So I got there, and it was a trip that changed my life. I got into a talk with a man who was teaching Zen meditation, and he said, cancer begins in your mind, and that's where you can go to get rid of it. So I understood what he meant, and for the first time I considered the possibility that I could do something about the cancer, and I wouldn't have to depend upon anybody outside myself or anything. And so I began to work on myself with tools that I used, that I had learned with the Silva method: deep relaxation and affirmation, visualization, positive thinking. I worked on myself for 2 months. And then the doctors decided they must have made a mistake. There was nothing there anymore, and they didn't know how to explain that. So of course that's an interesting story in itself. And there was a gift of serendipity, because I had been nearsighted for about 20 years. I had worn eyeglasses, and well, it was interesting to me. One day I lost my wallet, and with my driver's license, I had to get a new driver's license. And I forgot my glasses. And so I went to the Motor Vehicle Bureau, and they tested my vision. They told me I had normal vision, and I was surprised. And also I used to work for a consulting firm, but when they heard I was terminally ill, they fired me, because they couldn't depend on me for any long-term projects. So here I was on the streets of New York looking for a job and expecting to die any day. And the interesting thing is they may not refuse you a job for health reasons if you're qualified. And so I got hired, and I had a physical with the company, and they told me also I had normal vision. And I was surprised about that, didn't understand what happened, so I decided to see what I could find out about it, to see what did I do right, what was it that resulted in my vision getting clearer. I heard that there were people who were in the business of helping others improve their eyesight. So I thought, well, if this is a field of study, there must be books about it. So I went to the library, and there were, at the time, 8 books on the subject. 8 books is not so many. So I read the 8 books, and 7 of them were talking about the other one. And after I read the 8 books, I realized I have read everything on the subject, everything that has been written. I must be an expert. But I wasn't reading about it to see how to do it. I was reading about it to see how I did it. What did I do right? And with my experience, what could I recognize about what had happened in my consciousness? And by that time, I was teaching the Silva method in New York, and talking to people about what I had realized about the relationship between eyesight and consciousness. And after a while, they started giving me their eyeglasses and saying they didn't need them anymore. I was surprised, but happy for them. And so I also had more people to talk to about what had happened with them. And so now I'm functioning as a healer, and with the idea that when somebody has a symptom, any kind of symptom, the symptom on the physical level reflects tension in the person's consciousness about something happening in their life at the time the symptom began. So I'd like to share with you what what I had realized and understood about the relationship between eyesight and consciousness. So for those of you who are wearing glasses, if you take a look at when you began to experience unclear vision, then I'd say that was a period of stress. And you looked out through your eyes and you saw a picture that wasn't clear, and the way you talked to yourself about that, the words that you used, was you decided there must be something wrong with your eyes. So you went to the eye doctor and you sat in front of the machine, and they put different lenses in front of your eyes until you succeeded in reading the letters. And you were probably told, make friends with your glasses because they're going to be with you for a long, long time. Now, one of the things that I understood about the relationship between consciousness and the state of the physical body is that when you're stressed, when you experience stress, the stress in your consciousness is experienced on the physical level, for example, as tension in the muscles. So we can say muscular tension is emotional tension stored on the physical level. Around each eyeball, you have 6 muscles, and these hold stress also. So 4 of the muscles pull the eye back into the socket, and when they're tensed, the eyeball becomes shorter. 2 muscles circle the eye like a belt. When those are tensed, the eyeball becomes longer. And so part of the normal accommodation mechanism of the eyes is that the eyeball is changing shape depending upon what you're looking at and how you feel. So go back to this period of stress in your life now. The tension about what was happening was stored among other places in those muscles. So you went and you got your glasses. And when you sat in front of this machine where they put different lenses in front of your eyes, the lenses compensated for the shape of your eyes as they were in that moment. Now, if your experience was like my experience, when you went back to get your glasses sometime later, maybe you put them on and they weren't comfortable for you. Any of you experienced something like that? So, no, you didn't. Okay, anybody who did? For me, it was like that, and so I asked the eye doctor, why do they hurt my eyes? And he said, oh, now your eyes have to get used to the glasses. Does that sound familiar to you?
I don't wear glasses, but I've heard people saying things like that.
Yeah, it's a pretty common experience.
Yeah.
So I asked, why do my eyes have to get used to the glasses? You've just made these glasses for my eyes. If you get a pair of shoes made for your feet, and they hurt your feet, and then the salesman says, now your feet have to get used to the shoes, what's the point? Okay, so what I understand now is that when I went back for the glasses, I had different tensions in my consciousness, and therefore different tensions in those muscles, and therefore the eyeball was a different shape than it was at the moment my eyes were examined. But in order to see through those glasses, I had to make my eyeball the same shape it was at the moment my eyes were examined, by creating the same tension in the muscles, by creating the same tension in the consciousness. So, what I realized now is that the glasses not only hold your eyes in a fixed focus, in fact, they hold your consciousness in a fixed focus. And they keep you looking through an emotional perceptual filter related to the emotion that you were feeling when your vision became unclear. I've been working with the idea that there is a certain kind of personality profile that's associated with every symptom. And as I looked into the relationship between eyesight and consciousness, I saw that there was a personality profile associated with each kind of eyesight. So, when somebody is nearsighted, Anybody nearsighted here?
What?
Okay.
Short-sighted.
Short-sighted.
Myope.
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 Yes.
Okay. You have to bring things closer in order to see them. So the direction of your attention is towards the inside or away from the outside. And there's a sense of retreating inward, away from a threatening world. So it feels not safe to show something about you. Usually for fear it would be judged. So the emotional perceptual filter is insecurity or fear. When someone is farsighted, you have to hold something further away to see it. So the emotional perceptual filter is energy expanding away from the inside, holding away the outside. And it's experienced emotionally as anger or guilt. Astigmatism is a distortion. Shapes are distorted. And in looking at the body as a map of the consciousness, we can look at one eye as the will eye and the other eye as the emotional eye. For most people, your right eye is your will eye, your left eye is your emotional eye. For left-handed people, it's reversed, for people who are born left-handed. So we can say that your will eye represents seeing clearly what you want, and your emotional eye represents seeing clearly what you feel. And so when someone has astigmatism, if you ask them, what do you want, or how do you feel about this, something comes up and they decide it's not appropriate to say that. I'm going to say this instead. And then they believe what they said instead of what came up for them. And so their vision shows them that's a distortion. Shapes are distorted. Straight lines look wavy. In fact, there are other so-called organic vision disorders that also tell a story. When someone has, what is it called? When there's a gray filter in front of the eyes, cataracts, yeah. Then we say the person has decided at the time the cataracts begin that they have nothing to look forward to. And when we look at the eyes, besides looking at them as the will eye and the emotional eye, we can look at them as the male eye and the female eye. So if the cataract is only in the male eye, then we can say something about a sense of separation from a male, where the person has nothing to look forward to in terms of having lost the male in their life. And the emotional eye, the female eye, would be something about nothing to look forward to with regard to a female who they may have had a sense of separation from. When we're talking about a sense of separation, when someone has separation of the retina, then there too we're asking, who were they separated from at that time in terms of their male eye, in terms of their female eye? If we take a look at the emotional perceptual filter that we're associating with each kind of eyesight, we're saying nearsighted people are seeing the world through an emotional perceptual filter of insecurity or fear. Fear is always about the future. So we can say fear is faith in a negative future. And so in terms of what the nearsighted person is doing in their consciousness, they're considering various possible negative futures. You got to watch out for that, be careful about that. You don't know who you can trust, and this might happen, that might happen. With the far-sighted person, what they're doing in their consciousness is more about the past. So it's faith in a negative past. I should have done that, or he should have done that, or she should have done. I should have said this, and a bit of anger about what had happened. Although I would say generally when it happens in children, in young children, it's more about a sense of guilt, not wanting to look inside, feeling like I did something wrong.
Excuse me, Martin, what
Yes.
about babies who are born blind?
Yeah, the question is, were they born blind, or did it happen sometime after birth? It's not like a baby pops out and somebody says, look, he's blind. Generally, it happens when children are born prematurely. So they're taken out, they're put into an incubator, and their first experience in the world is one of isolation and no human contact.
Yeah.
And then when they come out from the incubator, then there's something wrong with their vision. So, as I see it, it would be a reaction to the sense of isolation that happened after they were born. But before they had a chance to be examined. Generally, with any symptom, we're working with when the symptom began or was discovered or diagnosed. Those are all significant events in the person's life.
But don't people discover that babies are blind before they're born these days?
Well, there's nothing to look at before you're born.
Well, there is. Yes, there is. There's X-rays. There's
Okay, if
scans,
somebody
there's all
doesn't
sorts
have an
of
eye or something. I'm working with the idea that we'll reach a consciousness and we're responding in some way to what's happening around us. So you're inside there and things happen around you and you decide how to respond. You decide what to think, what to feel. And your decisions might leave you in balance or they might leave you out of balance. If they leave you with tension, then you're out of balance. When the tension reaches a certain level of intensity, you create a symptom. So the symptom on the physical level is reflecting tension in your consciousness. Before we're born, we're doing the same thing, but the environment is much more limited. It's about the sense of contact with the parents. And either you feel the sense of contact or you don't. And if you feel the contact, what that means in terms of being a child is that I'm loved. And when you don't feel the contact, that means I'm not loved. And then the infant is reacting to that perception. So when somebody really is born with a symptom, then what I look at is what was happening in the parents' consciousness about having this child. How did the parents feel about this child coming into the world? And then that makes sense. I worked with one child who was born with a tumor at the base of its spine. And so in the way I see the body as a map of the consciousness, it reflects the person's sense of contact with their mother. I was speaking with the mother. And she said, according to the doctors, the tumor started growing in her 6th month of pregnancy. And so I asked what was happening between you and the child's father at that time. And she said, oh, we had a terrible fight and he left and it looked like he wasn't going to come back. And I asked, how would you feel about having this child if he wouldn't come back? And she said she had thought about it. And she thought if the father didn't come back, she didn't want to have a child. When she had that thought, the tumor started growing in the baby. So the father came back, they reconciled, and they decided they wanted the child. And if we look at this through the eyes of the child, we can say the child is saying, look, first you say you love me, then you say you don't, then you say you do, make up your mind. If you want me to be here, I'm happy. Otherwise, I don't need to be here. So, as I said, the baby was born with a tumor at the base of its spine with a 50% chance of survival. So, in cases where the vision really is affected before the birth, where it may be detected before the child is born, that's what I'm looking at. What's happening in the consciousness of the parents, what's happening between the parents. And the decision to not have a child at that time might be because of questions of the stability of the couple, or financial questions, or questions about freedom, and so on. Any other questions about what I've been talking about so far?
Yes.
Yes.
The vast majority of people become presbyopic who didn't need glasses before in their mid-40s. So, is this a stress phenomenon, or is this an effect of dehydration, which is...
Okay, actually that's cultural. So in Western society, we're told 50% of the population wears glasses. In Russia it's 20%. In China it's 10%. So I see it as a cultural belief and cultural values. In our society, we're told, as you get older, you get useless and you fall apart. We're also taught it's better to give than to receive. And people consider themselves less and less important. Now, because it's different in different cultures, we can't say it's an absolute in terms of the human condition. So I take a look at to what degree our Western society encourages the development of the personality that's associated with farsightedness. If we're talking again about nearsighted and farsighted people, we can say in an absolute sense, everybody's equal, right? What one person wants or feels is just as important as what anybody else wants or feels. With a nearsighted person, it's like the boundaries move closer to them. And what they experience is what I want and what I feel is more important to me than what you want or what you feel. But as we get older and we're given these values by society, not to be selfish, we develop more and more the sense of what you want and what you feel is more important to me than what I want and what I feel. And so we develop the farsighted personality. What's interesting to me is the people who don't become farsighted as they get older, and what's different with them. So I'm not looking at it from a strictly physical cause and effect relationship, but rather things happen on the physical level when the conditions are there in the person's consciousness.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that logic, but the data's there to test this empirically now, particularly with the Japanese culture and Chinese, because I suspect that our predominant work at a close fixed focal length as opposed to our adaptive evolution, which was principally for most of the hours of the day long-sightedness and brief periods of work close up. We've distorted that in the way we live, particularly in the West, through focus on books and text and computers, whereas rural China, and before that rural Japan, had predominantly many fewer, proportionately speaking, people treating their eyes to this kind of adaptive process. But we've seen this now for 30 years in Japan. We're seeing it for China. We should be seeing an increase in the number of people hitting this presbyopia in midlife if that scientific rationale is in play as opposed to what you're suggesting.
We can look at things statistically, but for me statistics do not prove cause and effect.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can notice that these things are going on in society, but the point of view that I've taken is to take a look at what is going on in the consciousness of the people. Because, for example, Eskimos, as a race, had perfect eyesight until they began to develop Western values. This is without computers and without books.
But
They
had a
became
lifespan of 50
nearsighted.
years or 50,
Huh?
but they had a life expectancy of 54 years or something.
Yeah, but the point is about their eyesight. The state of their eyesight deteriorated when they accepted Western values, and it didn't have anything to do with books and computers. So I'm looking at what is going on in the consciousness.
Yeah.
I mean, with statistics, do you know which country in Europe has the lowest birth rate?
Germany.
Actually, Italy.
Italy,
Yeah.
Wow.
That means there is a statistically significant correlation between eating pasta and having fewer children. You know, so statistics, you can prove anything. What's interesting to me is that people are improving their eyesight by working on their consciousness, okay, and releasing the tension from the consciousness that has been stored in the eye muscles. Optometrists are working sometimes with what they call motility training, which are just eye exercises. And in some of the Eastern traditions, they have Hatha Yoga eye exercises. And what they're designed to do is to restore flexibility to the muscles around each eyeball. But as they're restoring flexibility to those muscles, releasing the tensions from the muscles, it's also a kind of enforced meditation. So they're also releasing the tensions from the consciousness. And the effect is people's eyesight improves, even when they haven't changed the basic lifestyle of reading, using computers, and so on. When I went through the improvement process myself, I wasn't working on my eyesight.
You were what age at that time? I don't want to monopolise the questions, but what the only real truth that I can have is what I experienced myself.
Yes.
The rest is what people say in statistics.
That's true, that's true.
What bothers me is that for the last 5 or 6 years I've needed glasses to read. Now, if I compress my eyes, so I'm now applying more muscle force, not relaxing them, I can see text clearly.
You're changing the shape of your eyeball.
Exactly. What am I doing? I'm increasing the width of the lens. That's saying the lens doesn't have enough power to focus it on my retina.
Yes.
Which means my muscles are not strong enough, usually. So by compressing, I'm actually doing the reverse of the relaxation.
No, actually you're changing the shape of your eyeballs one way. And you can change the shape of your eyeball in other ways by working on the muscles that have been holding the eye in a shape different than its natural shape. So you achieve the same thing, but not in a way that leaves the eyeball in its natural shape. So yeah, you can change the shape of your eyeball like that. You'll see clearer, but it's not having a permanent effect. The important thing for me is that there are people who are improving their eyesight.
Yeah.
And as I say, for me, when my eyesight changed, I wasn't working on my eyesight. I had the operation on the back of my neck, and they removed the back part of 4 different vertebrae from C4 to C7, and the muscles that had been attached to the spinal column, they didn't put back the process, so they just reattached the muscles to each other. They expected me to die anyway. And so it was a very delicate balance with a lot of pain. And when I put on my eyeglasses, they pulled my head down, just the weight of the eyeglasses. So I had other things more important to look at in my life. You know, if something was blurry out there and I didn't feel good about it, I would look at something close instead, you know, just to find something to feel good about. And as time went on, I began to notice things. While I saw things blurry, I didn't care that they were blurry. And most people who see blurry try to do something about it. And they put more tension in their consciousness. So when you feel tense about not seeing clearly, you see less clearly. But for me, I didn't care. You know, it's like you go to an art museum, if you see a painting by Salvador Dali, it looks so real, you can just reach in and touch what's there. But if you see something by Monet, you have to back up to see it. They were farsighted. Modigliani was, he had astigmatism, you know, his shapes are distorted. So for me, it was all art. If I didn't see the details, I appreciate the colors, I appreciate the forms. And what I began to notice was, at a certain distance, you know, I might be able to just make out the bricks in the building. And I began to notice that I could see the bricks further and further away. It was a bizarre phenomenon, but again, not that important to me, because I had other things happening that were a lot more important. And because every day was my last day, well, as I say, terminal cancer gives you a certain freedom. You can do anything. You know, you don't have to worry about what people think or what people feel. You're in the middle of a boring conversation, you know, and you might have 10 minutes left to live. You ask yourself, do I want to be doing this for the rest of my life? You know? And if the answer is no, say, gotta go, you know. And it doesn't matter if they feel okay about it or they don't feel okay. So for me, I was just experiencing my sense of freedom and just being real, being myself.
So you should have become nearsighted then?
No, because I didn't care. You know, I didn't care. I'm in the healing work that I'm doing, I'm working with these energy centers. They're called chakras. And each chakra is related to a particular part of your consciousness. So if everything that you can possibly experience can be divided into 7 categories, then each portion of your consciousness is associated with one of these energy centers. And the solar plexus energy center is associated with your sense of eyesight and also with the parts of your consciousness concerned with power, control, freedom. Okay, so interesting that when I was just focused on being myself and experiencing my sense of freedom, that's when the tension was released from my consciousness. Before, I was trying to be what I thought others wanted me to be. And that was the big change, you see, and then just focused on being myself.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, dear.
Did you notice any other things? You're talking about sight became more refined. Obviously, something happened.
Yes.
But did you find in the other senses? You know, we have.
Can I have a pointer?
In your other senses, sense of hearing became more acute. Sense of smell became more apparent. Sense of taste. Sense of touch, did you find anything happen in those senses as well?
Well, something happened.
Was it an overall effect?
Something happened in those senses, but that was pretty immediate when I was told that I had to have an operation. At the time, my right arm was paralyzed, my legs weren't working. And the doctor told me, you have to have this operation in a few hours. And if you live through the operation, you might come out a quadriplegic. And when I asked if I had time for another opinion, he said, if you call for a sneeze now, you might die or become quadriplegic. So I had to deal with the states that people go through when they're told they're about to die. You know, this isn't real, it's not happening to me, these are actors and actresses. Wait a minute, let's make a deal, we can talk this over. You know, and eventually I had to deal with the state of accepting the possibility that what they were saying was real and it was happening to me and it might be true. And when I did that, it was like a wave of energy moved through me and I shook for a while. And when it was over, all my senses were more alive. It was like the colors were brighter, I could feel more, hear everything. It was as if there had been some filter between me and the experience of life. And ironically, it had been the fear of death. Okay, so in my case, I would say that filter had been removed, and the thing that hadn't yet manifested was this the sense of eyesight. I've worked with people since who have other senses that have been affected, and in the way I work with healing, we describe the symptom from the point of view the person created it. So instead of saying the person can't hear, there's something they don't want to hear, there's something they don't want to listen to. And it's in relation to what was happening in their life when the hearing was affected. Maybe they don't want to hear conflict, or they don't want to hear bad news, or people arguing. So then they can see how they reacted to that situation. And then the idea is, if the symptom is a result of a decision that they made, they can just make a different decision. Release the tension from their consciousness. And the effects of the tensions then release. The release can be very quick, or it can be very gradual, depending upon the person's beliefs on their sensitivities, whatever they believe is possible. So I'm working with the idea that everything is possible. Yes, sir?
Although I fully understand the ascendancy of the mental over the physical, I've experienced it myself. Aren't you discounting the physical a bit too much? Our dog died 2 weeks ago. He was 17 and a half. He had cataracts in both eyes. I don't think that that was mental.
That's okay. I would see it as related to what was happening in his consciousness.
But he was old.
Also, yes.
Simply old.
Yes, yes. And
the body does deteriorate, even with the things which I agree with. I know that you can prolong your life, you can make your life much better. I've had the experience of the mental over the physical, but one does get old, one does die.
That's true. Most people die.
Yes.
Okay.
And most people get ill, and most people...
Maybe, but some people just go
accident.
quietly in their sleep, and not all old dogs get cataracts. So in the way I would look at it, I'm saying, okay, things do happen on the physical level, according to physical cause and effect reality. I don't discount that, but I relate it to what's happening in the consciousness at the time the symptom began. So I would look at what was happening in his life when he began to have cataracts. Something happened that he reacted to, and that was the way I would say he reacted to the situation. Dogs have a consciousness also.
Sure.
I mean, you must know that. I'm sure you talked to your dog, you felt a sense of contact. Yes.
Martin, talking about dogs, certain races of dog tend to have some sort of diseases. You think is that is linked to a frame of character that they've got in that race?
I would see it as that. I would see any symptom related to a sensitivity in the consciousness. And as humans, of course, we're in a certain culture, and each culture has certain beliefs, certain values. And what's interesting to me is that there are particular symptoms that are more prevalent in one country than in another country. Why is it that there's more AIDS and tuberculosis, for example, in Africa than there is in the rest of the world? So we become susceptible to the conditions to the degree that we accept those societal values. And if we have accepted particular societal values, like in our society, values that are related to impaired eyesight, then to that degree we have a symptom. But we can also release those beliefs, those values, if they don't work for us. Again, what's interesting to me is the people who do not wear glasses, the people who are in their 80s and 90s and hear about people climbing trees when they're 120 years old. I mean, you know, what's different about them? What's different about their consciousness?
Yeah.
Yes.
Reminds me of my grandmother. She wore glasses for 50 years, and then when she was 85, she was settling. Finally, she was living with one of her daughters, and after a few months, her vision got back clear, just clear. She could sew without glasses, and everybody was like, "What is going on?" And I knew it was like she for the first time in a long time, she was just, you know, not having any fears and relaxed and just waiting for the moment to go.
And okay about it.
And okay about it, but she was very nearsighted before that.
That's it.
Yeah.
She was nearsighted before.
Very.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again,
No,
the,
not
she was
farsighted.
farsighted.
She was farsighted.
Right.
Very farsighted.
the interesting thing to me is about the people who succeed in changing their vision, one way or the other, either by working with the eye exercises or in the people that I work with, changing their values, changing their beliefs, releasing old ideas and opening to others. And the effect of that is their vision improves.
Martin,
Yes, sir.
retracing your logic there, because the big question is not whether it's true or not, it's how do we deal with the problem ourselves to redress the deficit, the defect.
Yes.
Now, so with the eye, related to the solar plexus chakra and the loss of power. So to redress that, it's not releasing attention, it's to get your power back. Now, how do you do that?
It's not about the loss of power, but for some people it can be that if they're looking through a filter of fear and their beliefs are running around with I can't, then they change it to I can. Power is not a state of tension. When you're powerful, you know it. And it's not like, I can, it's I can.
It's the reverse. If you're not feeling
it's I can. You know, not feeling your power is a state of tension.
That's the state of tension.
That's the state of tension. Power is I can. It's not I can. You don't have to assert it, you don't have to affirm it, you know it. And it's just a state of being. So that's what I would see it related to. And again, for me, what we have to look at is when people do improve their eyesight, how did they do it? How did they do it? And there are different ways to do it. And the way I'm working, it's about looking at the tensions that were in their consciousness at the time their eyesight was affected and changing their mind about something. Okay, when I was 16 years old, I became nearsighted. So I had to look at what was going on for me at that time. So imagine a 16-year-old Scorpio boy who wasn't sure that it's okay to feel sexual. You know, I was taught it really wasn't okay. So I was just nearsighted for about 5 years. And then at 21, I went into the Marines. And when they tested my eyes, suddenly I had astigmatism. I never had astigmatism before. And I asked them, look, I've had my eyes examined every year. How come nobody ever discovered astigmatism? Oh, well, maybe you didn't have a proper examination. I mean, come on, right? Every year. But
didn't want to go in there.
in the Marines. I was in the Marines, I signed in. But in the Marines, they have different values than in general society. In the Marines, values that are considered very positive are not socially acceptable. In society, you have to be aggressive, you have to love to fight, and if you're not really like that, they encourage you to be like that. So after getting beaten up every night, I thought, maybe I should play the game. You know, and that's what happens. You forget that you're just pretending. And so astigmatism is wanting to adapt to values that are not yours. You pretend to have certain values. So all that, and this was a strong astigmatism. When I put on the glasses for the first time, I felt like I was walking on a 45-degree angle. I mean, it was, yeah, it was a bit funny too, because that was the week that we were on the firing range, so I was learning to fire a rifle. Like that. Okay, but I can relate it to what had been going on in my experience, and again, being terminally ill, not caring what other people thought. I didn't have to fit in to anything or anybody or any kind of values. And what I recognized was, it doesn't matter what your values are. Somebody out there will applaud them, and others will condemn them. And it doesn't matter, you know, so you have a choice who you want to be around. So you can be around people who appreciate your natural way of being. And then without any change in yourself, it's not just okay to be you, it's what they appreciate about you. You know, and then the source of the tension is released. You don't have to adapt. You can feel comfortable to just be yourself and know that you're appreciated for being who you are. So, any other questions?
Yeah, one more.
Yes, sir.
The presbyopia, it comes on gradually.
Yes.
And the book's here to start with,
Yes.
and then, you know,
Your arms get too
it's doing
short.
this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
which
because
is kind of indicative of just, you know, a biological and organic decay process.
it's one way to see it. And another way to see it is you gradually accept the different values. Look, as you're getting older in our society, as I mentioned, we have certain beliefs. You tend to fall apart and get useless. Don't give grandpa the remote control, you know. It's, but the people that are running the countries of the world are older than that. So what do you think about that? But as people are getting older, it's like they have less and less to look forward to. And their life is about what happened behind them. So they're more preoccupied with the past than with the future. And we can say, well, if far-sighted people are preoccupied with the past and nearsighted people are preoccupied with the future, where can they go? To the present. You know, here and now, live the present moment and don't worry about the future and leave the past, because that was also part of what was going on in my consciousness at the time. You know, I had no future, all I had was the present moment. The past was, forget it, that was already past. You know, it was just here now, this is my last moment alive. So I learned to live in the present moment.
You know, you were a young man at that time.
What do you mean? Yeah, now the body is...
What I'm trying to say is that I agree that that there is truth in what you're saying.
Yes.
But at the same time, we know that when we're born we're about 90% water, and when we die we're 70%, which means what's killing us is dehydration, because the plumbing is just getting less efficient. The rate of delivery of what we need to rebuild is now not keeping pace with the rate at which we're eliminating all the toxic products that we need to get rid of. So we're gradually, and when this presbyopia thing starts happening, it's at that point people start noticing the wrinkles are getting a bit obvious and deep, so you can see that you're drying out. Now, the eye is an aqueous ball, it's a liquid ball, so it has to be happening here too, because you can see it happening in your skin.
Yes.
So I can see lots of organic, good, easily testable organic arguments for this process.
And then you can also say maybe if the people are drinking more water, that'll improve their eyesight.
Exactly, and this is what happens when people get a real shock, even though I know you went and ate hamburgers because that's what you felt like eating.
Yes.
You figured you only had a month or two to go. But the majority of people, when they're given a real wake-up call and they're told, well, you know, you're on the way out, they do everything in their power to redress the bad habits. They quit smoking, they don't drink as much, they start eating organic vegetables, they drink the 10 glasses of water a day. They're rehydrating their systems by doing this. They change their diets, they change their lifestyle, they have
and they change their consciousness.
Yep.
Yeah, and
It's
that's...
all in there.
Yeah, so you're looking at it from one angle, I'm looking at it from another angle. The important thing is there's something one can do about it, one way or the other.
Yeah, I guess what I was just really thinking about at that time, my son was born to a lady who is into something called nature cure. It's about as an extreme version of naturopathy as you can have. And the old fellow who taught her, he was like you. He was he was diagnosed terminal cancer of the liver when he was 23, and he got into eating pineapples, were the only fruits in season at the time in Queensland. He started just eating pineapple, only pineapple every day until he developed a fever. 54-day fast, and he passed the tumour out of his rectum. There's no passageway there to do this, but this is his claim, and then he lived to 83. The point was he changed hermaphrodite sex purely with diet.
Yes, that's another way, but here we're talking about how to do it with consciousness. And there isn't any only way. This is one way to do it. And this is the specialty that I've been working with, and how I've been seeing people improve their eyesight. It's, I don't believe in any only way. There are a lot of different ways to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. But this is the way that I have experience with, and so what I'm speaking about here.
Can you see the chakras? What do you feel when you talk about chakras and working on them? Do you see them? Do you feel them?
Well, chakras are not really the subject of tonight's talk, but yes, I just look inside and I see what's going on there. In fact, I teach people how to do that. And so what I do professionally, my major thing, is teaching seminars where I teach people how to see themselves as each an energy system and get a bit away from physical cause and effect reality, and how to see auras and how to see chakras and how to read the body as a map of the consciousness in order to understand the inner cause to the physical symptoms. So many people come to heal physical symptoms. Some people come to learn how to help others. So yeah, it's a pretty easy thing to do. People just have to get beyond their self-limiting ideas.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I just look inside. I see what's there.
In your mind or with your eyes?
Well, your sense of vision on the physical level involves your eyes,
Yeah.
but energetically it's about your inner sense of vision. So that's what we work with, all your, what we call subjective senses. Okay, but I believe everybody has that. And we have to get away from the idea that, you know, you have to go to somebody special who does that. It requires a gift. You don't have it. You had to be born with it and you weren't. So I'm working with consciousness and putting people back in touch with their ability to feel energy, direct energy, see energy, work with it, and to see inside when somebody is in balance or not in balance, and to move things around in a way that has an effect on the physical level. Yes, sir.
Is your philosophy and the way of looking at things, how is that viewed by the medical profession, the sort of, you know, the standard way of doing things? Are you a quack? Are you do they accept you as something they haven't really considered and ought to be considering, or how is it?
I have doctors in my classes.
Right.
So those doctors are interested in helping people, and for them this is adding some dimensions and adding tools to their toolkit that makes them better equipped to help people classic medical reality is strictly physical cause and effect. But doctors also know that some people in hospitals die no matter what they do, and some people get better no matter what they don't do. And the ones that are curious about why is that, you know, then we have to look at what is going on in the consciousness. And some people call it something about attitude, but attitude is also something happening in the consciousness. Yes, sir. Okay, so in answer to your question, it depends upon the segment of the medical profession that we're talking about. And some of them have a hard time believing that these things exist. But the fact is that people do release symptoms, and coincidentally, it happens just after they have been working on themselves and changing their mind. When I went back for the examination with the doctor who had written me off, I showed up a year later. He was a bit surprised to see me, and I started to explain what I had been doing, you know, but he walked out of the room. But his assistant looked at me and he said, "You've made some changes in your life, huh?" I said, "Yes." So he knew. So thank you for this evening, for the opportunity to share some ideas with you, and perhaps it makes you think about things.
Sure.
Thank you, Martin.